Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Welcome back to the channel for the first video for 2018. Thank you for being here. I'm feeling rested, ready and raring to go, and I hope you are too. Hope you had a good break. And we're gearing up for an epic 2018 for the heavyweight division. So before I get into a few thoughts on the year ahead on a couple of the big fights on the horizon, because we do have a good couple coming up, I wanted to say something. Thank you. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. It's probably something I don't say nearly often enough, but thank you for supporting the channel and taking this ride with me. Because when I started 6 months ago, I wasn't exactly sure what would happen. Would the channel take off? Would anybody be watching? I probably would have done it regardless because, you know, I like talking boxing. And I'll keep talking boxing, and it's been fun for the most part, actually. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to bringing you more news and views from the heavyweight division in the year ahead. So thank you for sticking with me. And it is a bit like a marathon, so with that in mind, I'll look to bring you about 4 to 6 videos a week, probably 6 at the upper end. You know, I'm looking to stay in this for the long haul, so I don't want to sort of flame out at some point. But I imagine, though, that there will be some periods, especially into the lead up to some of these big matchups, where there will be a little bit more extra content, and maybe it'll dip afterwards in the immediate days or whatever. We'll have to see how it goes. And what a year it's looking like. I'll start with the obvious. Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker. So while this unification clash hasn't officially been announced, the fact that they've stated in recent days that they've come to terms on the money, well, that means it's virtually a done deal. And what we're hearing now is venue, date and other associated logistics are now being worked on. So with March 31st or early April pegged as potential dates. Just on the purse split, because this was the big news over the Christmas and New Year's period, and I was eagerly reading the news when it came out. So Joshua, he's getting somewhere north of 65%, and Parker somewhere between 30 and 35%. I know that there's some out there who probably think Parker, well, he should have got more because he's a champion. He should have got the same as Joshua, etc. But for me, I think this split actually reflects the commercial reality of their respective profiles and what they bring to the table at this point in their careers. And you can certainly mount a case the other way if you really wanted to say, well, Joshua's got 2 belts, Parker 1, and so on. I mean, there's all sorts of arguments on this one. But I think that Parker's promoter, David Higgins of Duco Events, he secured a very good deal on the money front, particularly because Parker's cut is not a flat fee, and it's tied to the net profit. And so while we've heard figures bandied around of £5 to £6 million, or thereabouts, which might be the thick end of 12 or 13 million New Zealand dollars, it has the potential to be more. Or less, but I think it's more likely to be more rather than less. And that all depends on how big this event is. And this unification, it is shaping to be one of the biggest fights in all of boxing in 2018. So you have the Golovkin-Canelo-Alvarez rematch. That's a big one. And there's a few other big fights on the horizon. But especially in this first 6 months of the year, Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker, should it be announced, shapes as a huge one. And everyone involved has a vested interest to ensure the promotion is done right and is well publicized. And given David Higgins and Eddie Hearn are involved, I'm sure there will be no shortage of entertainment and banter. But I do think Higgins needs to maybe wind his neck in a little bit, make it less about him and more about Joseph Parker as the fight gets near. Because let's face it, the very public negotiations that we've had until this point, they've put Higgins firmly at the center of things, not Parker. And sometimes the antics, they have left, you know, they have been a bit distasteful and a bit cringeworthy. But if you step back and look at it, some credit here. It did achieve a purpose of building some buzz for this unification bout. I mean, not everyone has enjoyed the buzz though. So I'll just talk on this before going to the next point. I've had a number of people leave comments saying the very public negotiations, the nature of them, it would have been best left behind closed doors. We didn't need to have all the dirty linen, all the laundry aired out all the snakes, all the ladders, everything come out to us, because why did we need to know every single blow-by-blow detail of the negotiation? Should have been done behind closed doors, and leave the announcement of a unification bout as the first part of the build-up. So that's what a lot of people have been saying in various comments that have been left across various videos. And I get that, and in an ideal world, well, that would be my preferred option. But I think in this case, and some credit to David Higgins here, because Joseph Parker's worldwide profile is so low in comparison to Anthony Joshua's, because it's not really up for debate, this is what's happened, is what I'll call a pre-build-up. It was needed to get Parker's name out there, expose him to more people outside of New Zealand and Australia, where he's well known, across the world, to more boxing fans, especially casual fans, and help build some name recognition, because he needed it. In November, David Higgins, he actually said on a New Zealand radio station that him making noise on behalf of Parker, it would make Parker a star, and thus ensure 2 stars were in the ring come fight night. I mean, make of that what you will. Some of that reasoning, for me, it's a bit spurious, because ultimately performances in the ring will be responsible for the bulk of Parker's stock with the public. But to give Higgins his due, his antics have worked to a point, in that they have helped build brand recognition, and that's key. More people will know who Joseph Parker is when the unification is announced. It's probably not the scenario where he's saying Joseph Parker's a global superstar by the time the fight happens. I think that's just pie in the sky stuff. But there will be more people than there otherwise would have been who will know who Joseph Parker is now. But that brings me back to the point I was making before. In the lead up to this unification fight, whenever it is, late March, April, even if it's May, Higgins can't do it all on the PR front, and neither should he. Joseph Parker needs to do a better job of selling himself to the world. His personal management team, and that's different to his promoter, which is Duco Events, they need to work with Duco to ensure a multi-pronged communications plan or something similar is in place and implemented. They need it. It needs to include upping his game on a somewhat neglected social media platforms. Thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of followers who get next to nothing from Joseph Parker. There's not a lot coming out from him. All this audience there, it's going to waste. He needs to be out there, more interviews, more photo ops, and in general be in the public's gaze. You just can't go missing. He can't afford to go ghost. Not now, especially when you consider his cut of the pie in the fight with Anthony Joshua is tied to the profits. He needs to be selling himself. He is really singing for his supper. For Anthony Joshua, credit must go to him for wanting this unification, for pushing for it, and ultimately agreeing to a split that his promoter was adamant he'd rather not give Parker. In the end, if they wanted to make this fight, which it looks like they will now because they have agreed the purse split, they had to give some ground. It shows he's serious about following through on his plan to try unify all the belts in 2018. It's not just talk. We're on the verge of a fight announcement soon. In many people's eyes, Joshua, he will be the heavy favourite to beat Parker when they do meet. He definitely has the momentum heading into it, racking up 2 impressive wins in 2017 over legend Vladimir Klitschko and also Carlos Takam. So I agree on paper, he's the favourite. But I don't believe that this is going to be an easy fight by any measure. It's not going to be an easy night out for Joshua. This will be a tough fight. I remember when I did the Carlos Takam preview with Joshua, a lot of people were scoffing in my pre-fight video where I said, actually, I think this is going to be quite a tough fight. Takam will come in there. He'll be game. He'll be a hard opponent. He'll take Joshua deep into the fight. And that's exactly what happened. And I think we're going to see something very similar. And I know that there will be some who will be scoffing at that statement. They'll say Parker barely scraped by Takam when the two met. And that's true. I'm not going to deny it. It was a close encounter. But consider this. Parker was at the time a fringe contender. He was on the rise, and it was his first big step up. And since then, and he was 23, and since then, he's been involved in other tough encounters against the likes of Andy Ruiz, where he won the WBO strap in a close fight, and Hughie Fury. And that was somewhat controversial because of the scoring, but it was a good win. In some ways, it's a little hard to gauge how good Parker is and how good those wins were. It's hard for us to sort of gauge it because the two guys, Ruiz and Fury, they are often considered somewhat unknown commodities. Very talented guys who were also like Parker coming up, and they had some step-up fights, but it's not like they had a number of names under their records. So how good they are, I think ultimately time will prove how good those wins were. But my point being, by the time he meets Joshua, Parker will have had almost 2 years more experience under his belt as a pro since the Takam fight. That will be important. He might have been a little bit stagnant recently. Things might not have gone quite his way or how he thought they would go in the last couple of years. When he won the belt, that was something that did go his way. But it hasn't always been a smooth ride. He hasn't quite put together some of the performances that his fan base, myself included, expected of him. But he won. He got the W, and he keeps getting the W. So it's not something that can be just completely discounted. And, I don't think people can just say, Joshua's going to blast him out in a round. I don't think that. I think that's actually wishful thinking. Rather, I actually see this going quite late. I think this could be something where Joshua will get pushed by Parker. I haven't made my mind up who's going to win because I think it's a quite close fight. I think we're going to see a very good style matchup. And let's remember, that's something that, a lot of people point to with Joseph Parker is actually stylistically, maybe he hasn't been as matched with some of the guys that will make him look better. He's got wins, but he's won ugly. But on the experience side, conversely, Joshua has been racking up the experience. He's had some very big and good fights. He's been down on the mat, he's been through some adversity, and he's been learning on the job. He's been getting some great experience. So he's not the same person, the same fighter, the same boxer that he was even a year ago. He's a much better boxer. And actually his skills, he's very underrated in terms of, he's got great power and all that sort of stuff. But his actual boxing ability, I think, is vastly underrated at times. He's not just a Hulk. He can use his height and reach when he wants to. He does like fighting at the mid-range. He seems to be comfortable with that thing. But if he wants to use his height and reach, and if he wants to, work off the back, he can do all that. But will he? Sometimes you just don't know with Anthony Joshua. But he's got good power, and he's knocking everybody out. So it's fair to say, I like this matchup. I really like this matchup. And like I said before Christmas, I would expect an announcement for the unification bout to be set, to be announced, I should say, in the first 2 to 3 weeks of this month, in January. If an announcement pushes out, well, the dates will too. It'll either be later in April or later. But it's looking like there's going to be the best part of a 3-month build-up. So I'll keep my powder dry. Don't want to get into too many things because there's going to be plenty of time to work through all of the angles. And in an upcoming video, I do want to talk about Joseph Parker's much vaunted chin. Much has been made of Anthony Joshua's so-called glass jaw, but I thought it would be worthwhile actually just teasing out some of the things about Joseph Parker, his career, and his chin in particular. So stay tuned for that one. Now, a matchup that I do like that was also announced over the Christmas period. WBC champion Deontay Wilder against Cuban southpaw Luis Ortiz. Given this was meant to happen a couple of months ago, it does feel a little bit like deja vu, but I still like this fight. As we know, Ortiz, he's been grafting away for years, looking for a shot wherever he can get it, wherever he can take it. He's been much avoided. But he has also, it must be said, he's derailed himself twice now as a result of performance-enhancing drugs. back in 2014, for which he received a ban from the WBA, and then prior to the scheduled fight with Deontay Wilder in November 2017, failed the drugs test. Somewhat curiously, the WBC did let him off the hook not so long ago on medical grounds in relation to not disclosing a blood pressure medicine, which could be used as a masking agent. So he's been given a reprieve there by the WBC, hence this fight is being sanctioned, while the WBA has actually chosen to ban him for 12 months. So make of that what you will. But putting that aside, we have this fight, Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz. Second time it's been made. So for Ortiz, though, he's listed at 38 years of age. But being from Cuba, in that system, often the age is sort of dialed back a bit, so he could be much older. It's a second chance matchup. And this kind of feels like it could be his last title shot. Well, it could be first and only title shot, actually. I mean, it would be hard to see him coming back and being in the conversation if he loses, and especially if it's a bad loss. He showed against journeyman Daniel Martz in his most recent outing something is left in the tank. But sometimes it's easy to look very good against that caliber of opposition, especially when sometimes those guys, they're looking for a way out and looking for an easy payday. Given the PED situation, I do think Luis Ortiz should consider himself very lucky indeed to be in the position that he is in. For Wilder, a win over Ortiz, it'll go a long way to silencing his critics, who accuse him of padding his record with mediocre to middling opponents. And make no mistake, putting Ortiz, a consensus top 5 or 6 guy or thereabouts in the heavyweight division, on his record, even at 38 years old, it will be a significant achievement for the Alabama native. He needs it. But it's certainly not without risk. And Ortiz is far better than any of Wilder's previous opponents. And it's fair to say, Ortiz has been actively avoided in recent years by other top heavyweights. Other guys haven't wanted to jump in the ring. So credit must go to Deontay Wilder for not only wanting to fight Ortiz, but setting the bout a second time in the wake of the failed PED test. But I guess Deontay Wilder knows Ortiz is one of the few guys that people will give him credit for fighting. It's kind of all in now for Deontay Wilder. He needs to knock a big name off. I'm still weighing up how I see this one playing out. Both guys, they have power and good jabs. Wilder's jab has been improving in recent years. It's looking much better than it once did. It's not just a rangefinder, it's now a weapon. I mean, questions for me, though, include, how will Wilder react to facing a slick southpaw? Will Ortiz be able to utilize his 1-inch reach advantage? 84-inch reach. Now, that is a big reach. I mean, it can't be often that someone like Deontay Wilder at 6'7" with an 83-inch reach has the shorter reach of the two people in the ring. I can't imagine that has happened many times, if at all, during his pro career. I mean, like many of Wilder's fights, I could see him, though, biding his time and then dropping the hammer when it finally presents the opportunity. I mean, I would be shocked if he showed the same disregard that he displayed towards the overmatched and out-of-shape Berman Stavern in November. Wilder just treated him with disdain. And I'd note, I've seen Berman Stavern, he's posted a few clips recently on his Instagram of himself running, getting in shape. I mean, actually, a bit more of that before the fight with Wilder. It would have been advisable. But anywho, certainly for Wilder, 2018 shapes as a make or break year. He did make a lot of grandiose claims about being the most feared heavyweight of all time. He took potshots in 2017 at Mike Tyson's career. He lampooned the media and all and sundry for doubting the credibility of his record, and demanded he be respected and recognized as the best of the current heavyweights. So after 3 years as the WBC champion, and no signature wins to speak of on his record, It's time Wilder delivered to the fans. Not only his fans, but boxing fans. We know he's good. But how good? Is he just one punch, or is he more than that? We want to know, and it looks like we will find out in 2018. I'll look to get to the best of the rest in the next video. And certainly looking at the division, it's looking like a crunch year for a number of guys. So interesting times ahead. What do you make of it all? What do you make of these two big upcoming fights on the horizon? Wilder versus Ortiz and Joshua versus Parker. Drop a comment, hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. That's boxing_squared. I'm out.